Okay, let's go ahead and start to actually use WinJS now to pull some data from Twitter, and then we'll use some other WinJS utilities just to do a real quick, simple UI update. Nothing too fancy at this point. We'll make it more interesting in the next screencast. So WinJS does provide us with an XHR call that allows us to use the XML HTTP request object to go and talk to the networks. This is how we would generally get data using WinJS. Obviously, if you're more comfortable using something like jQuery, you could use that as we saw in part 2 of the screencast series. But we're going to call XHR. And what XHR does by default is it returns a promise to us. And what that means is whatever URL I go hit here inside of the XHR call is going to be handled asynchronously. So what I'm going to do is just pass in a configuration object, and we're going to go out and search Twitter. If I can type. And we're going to go hit search, and we're going to get those results as JSON. And what we're going to do is just issue a query looking for the Windows 8 hashtag, and I'm just going to ask it to give me 100 results back. That's all I'm going to do. Okay, so there is the URL. So when we hit this line of code, it's going to go off and do this HTTP request, and it's going to do it asynchronously, which means that we're going to actually, the UI thread is going to leave this method and return back to processing the UI. And as the way that we handle this return result is to use the promise. And I'm going to say then. I can also do done if I expect it to complete and not want to chain any additional promises on there. So you could, in this scenario, you could do it either way because we're not going to do any promise chaining. But so I say then. So when you return, I want you to do something. And what we do is we pass in a series of functions that are going to be processed. So the first function that we would pass in would be, this is what I want to do upon successful completion of the XHR call. If there's an error, then this is the function that I want you to call. So I could just say, go ahead and log the error, for example, something simple like that. And then if the promise supports progress, we could go ahead and put in a progress method and update the UI if we're waiting for a long download or something like that. So that's kind of the basic structure of working with any kind of promise. In this case, it's just the promise that happens to be returned by the XHR call. Now, what we're most interested in here, obviously, is working with a response once we get it. So this would be very similar to what we would do in a normal browser application. I'm just going to go grab the JSON object here. I'm going to ask it to parse, and I get the response, the payload, that's passed back. And what I want to do is go ahead and process the response text, which is the JSON payload, turn that into a collection of JSON stuff. Now what we're going to do just here to set up for the future screencast is set up a binding list. And what a binding list is a way to take a piece of data, typically an array, and put it into a data structure that can be bound to the elements on the user experience, on the UI side, so that as the data changes or is updated, they're automatically reflected into the UI. So what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and create a list. And I just go ahead and say I want to create a new JS binding list. And all I need to do with the initializer here is just pass in the initial array if I have data already. So we're going to go ahead and take that JSON value and just pass in the results. I could then bind that list to an element that it understands data binding, which we'll look at in the next screencast. We'll bind it actually to a list view control and display a grid of tweets. But what I'm going to do here is just to show that this works. I'm going to use another WinJS feature here just so you can kind of see what's in there. I'm going to go ahead and grab the title text from the UI. And what we'll do is we'll just grab WinJS again. And it's got a little utilities namespace, and we can run queries. This is kind of similar to the way we would do something with jQuery to go find elements. Same type of idea. And so I'm going to go find the div that has the page title class applied to it. There's only one of those, so I'll just go ahead and grab the very first one. And then we'll set the text content on that to the length of the list. Okay, so obviously lots of stuff going on with Windows 8 hashtag. So we should see when we run this application that we get a result of 100 put into the text. So let's go ahead and run this. And there we go. You can see that we have a value of 100, so we did return 100 tweets. Obviously not a very nice looking user experience, not very Windows-like. Doesn't really do much. We will come back in the next screencast and actually put a grid in place there to display and template all of the tweets that we're getting back. So come back next time to see how we can use Expression Blend in combination with Visual Studio to make this look a lot nicer and present our data in a way that the user will really appreciate.